Thank you. First of all, just in case, because I'm conscious it's a limited space of time, just to say congratulations for the students who started a tremendous fight back. It has been a tremendous I hope a lot of people learn lessons from the trade union movement, from the political parties. This is the fight back started back against the Tory party. Now, turning to the English Defence League and the Scottish Defence League, once again, the Scottish Defence League defeated, understand, about 4 or 5 of them turned up in Burberry scarves and were properly escorted away. But until November last year in Scotland, the English Defence League, the Scottish Defence League were able to, or the English Defence League it was actually, because the SDL was just the front for the English Defence League and the British National Party, but they were able to walk around in this country and pretend to be the master race. And in October last year, when they announced that they would march on Central Mosque, we actually united within the space of a few weeks within our thousands to stop them, and we were determined to make sure that our cities and our towns did not become no-go zones for black and Asian people. And it showed the English Defence League, the BNP and the SDL, and whatever the fascists wish to call themselves on whatever day of the week, that they were not welcome anywhere in Scotland. Some people at the time argued that to confront the Nazis was to deny them their freedom of speech, and there were those within my own community, within the mosques, who said we should simply ignore them. Both of those views were wrong, and because silence is not an option when it comes to defeating the Nazis. Their aim is to divide us by making scapegoats of one community, just as the fascists did with the Jews in the 1930s, and you cannot defeat Nazis in a rational debate. Now, Nick Griffin, a lot of people spend time and effort condemning Nick Griffin, and I have no problem with that. But Nick Griffin might well hate Muslims. But in this last decade, politicians and news editors have much more Muslim blood on their hands when you actually look at what's happened in the last decade. Politicians have for far too long pandered to the racists by condemning asylum seekers and the new hate figure of the Muslim community. And I'm glad when you look at what happened in the last several weeks with the tremendous support that the X Factor girl Gamu received in Scotland. But what concerned me was, what about the rest of the families and the ordinary people who are treated worse than animals by the UK Border Agency? We should be proud of the fact that the UK Border Agency is terrified of the campaigns that exist in Glasgow and refused to be silent and wish to withdraw the contract from Glasgow City Council. These campaigns started up in 2001, and we shouldn't forget it, when hundreds and then thousands marched across the streets after a Spirzak Dagger, an asylum seeker from Kurdistan, was murdered in the city, and what within 2 weeks led to the setting up of Sighthill United Against Racism and Poverty, and the only town and only place in the city in the United Kingdom which actually saw the white community and the asylum seekers coming together to march against racism and poverty. We should be proud of the daily demonstrations that don't actually come on the TV screens that take place at Brand Street. We should be proud of the people of Glasgow that actually stopped the dawn raids taking place. That is the anti-racist tradition on which the trade union movement is built on, and which we should be proud of. And with regards to the British National Party, it's not just another right-wing party that has happened to pick up a few seats. It is a fascist organisation that admires Adolf Hitler's Nazi government in Germany. Nick Griffin goes to great lengths to claim that the BNP has ditched its Nazi heritage. That's a simple lie. Because he knows that if the voters actually found out that he was a goose-stepping Nazi, then most people and most BNP voters would actually reject it. That is why they've spent so much time and so much effort trying to deny what they really are. That does not necessarily mean dropping fascism, but it means actually hiding it. And the BNP now does have an army of thugs that uses to spread race hatred and terror, and we cannot be complacent. The street-fighting thugs of the SDL are the street-fighting thugs of the British National Party. The street-fighting thugs of the English Defence League are the street-fighting thugs of the British National Party. And there are those who believe in the recent elections that the British National Party have been destroyed. We shouldn't forget that we have the Conservative Party in power in this country. And a massive vacuum is opening up in this country, which will fill with despair. And in that vacuum, into that vacuum, unless there is an alternative, then the BNP and their street-fighting thugs will fill that vacuum with their politics of hatred. In the 1930s, Hitler targeted the Jews in Britain, and in the 1970s, the National Front attacked black and Asian communities, and today their foot soldiers are directing their hatred towards the Muslims. And there is an economic despair that we have not seen in generations in this country. The BNP want white workers to blame migrants, foreign workers, for the rise in unemployment. That's why they're promoting the slogan of British jobs for British workers. Let us be clear. that migrant workers did not create the crisis. It was greedy bankers and a government that lost sight of the people that voted for it. We may disagree on many things within this movement, but there is one thing that unites us. If the BNP ever took power in this country, we could all end up in the concentration camps. And that means when the Nazis tried to take to the streets, like they did in the 1930s in Cable Street, the 1970s in Lewisham, the 1990s in Brick Lane, or last November in Glasgow and February this year in Scotland, it is vital that organisations like the TUC, the STUC, mobilise as many people as we can to stop them. Scotland United was set up within days with the unconditional support of the Scottish TUC. It was set up as a united front that brought on all the political parties, the churches, the mosques, to unite against fascism and the anti-racist organisations, with a central demand being that we will not allow the Nazis to march within our cities. We will not allow them to organise. We beat them in Glasgow, we beat them in Edinburgh, we beat them in Lockerbie, we beat them in Kilmarnock, and this was down to a simple issue. We built a united front whose central demand was that they must not be given the right to march or protest anywhere in our cities. Had we not built up support from every trade union, every political party, it would have been easy for the authorities to grant them the right to protest and march. What we had on our side was numbers. And there are always those, and I'll say this not as a criticism, but there are always those amongst our movement, young white males who are scarfed up, who see them as best anti-fascist fighters. I have no problem with fascists, and maybe that might get me into trouble, so I'll probably restrict what I'm going to say. With fascists receiving special treatment from these anti-fascist bashers, or whatever they will call them, I have no problem, I have no sympathy for any Nazi. But the question is, what is the best organised way to defeat fascism? Nazis drink every single day in our pubs, but what I am concerned about is members of our community are being murdered, when members of our community are being jailed for thought crime in a bogus war on terror. What I want to see is thousands standing shoulder to shoulder with our community, just as the movement did over a decade ago after the murder of Stephen Lawrence, or over Sarjeet Singh's choker, who was murdered 12 years ago. What filled the Muslim community with confidence in November and February in this country was when we saw our streets filled with thousands of anti-racists marching in solidarity with the Muslim community. And the simple fact is that unless we had organised the way we had, then the police would not have corralled the master race into the pubs in Glasgow or the pub in Edinburgh. They would not have denied them the right to march, and they would not have shipped them out of the city. The police were told unconditionally that if you allow the Nazis the right to march through the city, then all bets are off. That was the success of 14th of November and the 20th of February. Seeing the Nazis being put back on buses after spending all days after a national mobilisation, being only able to organise 60 in Glasgow and 60 or 30, whatever the number is, but derisory numbers in Edinburgh. It was total, utter humiliation and defeat for the master race. And for the Muslim community, it gave them confidence, the fact that the unions, the political parties, people of all creed and colour marched in the thousands on our streets, and we were the only people marching on our streets because these were our streets. And in Glasgow, we couldn't win the argument in November that for marching past the mosque, Central Mosque in solidarity, but 2 months later in Edinburgh we did, and there is no reason why our mothers and fathers, our brothers and sisters, or our children should hide or walk the streets with fear as they did in the 1970s. Mainstream Britain politicians have abandoned millions of working class people to mass unemployment, to bad housing, poor public services and hopelessness about the future. And it is on this which the Nazis will feed in such a frenzy. And Britain today is dangerous, with a bankrupted social democracy and lack of hope. It's a vacuum that the BNP will hope to fill once again, and we have no choice but to build a united movement to stop them. I know the left is split in Scotland. I know many people are split in Scotland, but when it comes to this issue, we have to unite. There is no other alternative. If there is to be a legacy of Ahmed Sheikh, of Chris Donald, of Sarjeet Singh Choker, or Kunal Manati murdered last year in Glasgow, then there should be no place for hatred in Scotland's multiracial and multi-religious community. If we united against racism and fascism, if we build the strongest and determined opposition, then the English Defence League and the Scottish Defence League will be repeatedly humiliated in Scotland and in England. In the last few months, we have seen those with power scapegoating those who have no power. Whether it be the proposed mosque in New York, whether it be the Roma expulsion in France, or whether it be attacks on the welfare state in Britain or attacks on students. These themes are familiar, we should be used to it, we should read our history books. Those in need of welfare supports are described as scourges. Muslims are described as terrorists. Romas are described as criminals. It's an unstable system of war, of crisis and poverty, and people can look for scapegoats when they feel dispossessed and powerless against a system that strips them of their livelihood. If we build an alternative, then we can be certain that when this country, when this government, the Tory government, wants to divide us with racism, then we can succeed. We can beat them at their own game. And we have it's not going to be an easy battle. I want to finish on saying this. What we face ahead is probably the most difficult struggle we have seen for generations. This recession poses new challenges to the anti-racism movement, and anti-racism cannot be taken for granted. It has to be well guarded and fought for anew. And whether it be the students who have shown us the way forward, and whether it be the students or the Muslims, all workers, black or white, we have to unite. When black, white and Asian people and Chinese people and the rest of the communities unite, we can demonstrate together. It is a message of unity. And when Muslims march alongside non-Muslims in this country, whether it be on demonstrations, trade union demonstrations, whether it be on student demonstrations, we couldn't give it a damn. But when we march alongside one another in solidarity, then it is a rebuff to those who say Muslims are terrorists, Muslims are extremists, because united we can defeat racism. Thank you.